Hello. Have you ever picked up a coin, like this pound coin here, and looked on the edge? Have you noticed how around the edge it's all sort of knurled and got little lines? Has it ever made you wonder why they're designed that way? The high value coins always have these knurled edges. Well, there's a reason. And when I tell you the story about how the king lost his head, that might give you a clue. So let me share my screen with you for a second, and then we can find out how that all works. Share screen, there we go. Share screen, there we go. Okay, so once upon a time there was a king. Let me do a king. Is this kingy? No, that's a bit green. Let's do what? It should probably be a gold crown, shouldn't it? Really, gold crown. Let's go gold crown. He's a really rich king, and the king was a huge guy. His big arms, big stomach, okay, and big legs and tree trunk legs. Ooh, big feet here. Okay, you probably guessed which king I'm drawing here. Of course, it's Henry. He loved having wars. And he would sort of spend all the money in the national treasure chest, I'll do a treasure chest, on warring and stuff like that. But he was very good at it. He was good at hunting. He enjoyed that sort of thing. But of course, when you do wars, you have to have things to do wars with. So he used to have lots of wars which involved things like ships. The Mary Rose, you'd have come across massive ship, okay, with carpenters and sailors. That costs you so much money. So he looked one day in his coffers and he went, oh, there's no money in my coffers. Okay, so he had a brilliant idea. What he did was he took the gold coins they used to use and he said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll just clip a little bit off the gold coins, off the corners of the gold coins at the edge, like that. Then we'll melt them all down in a sort of little furnace and we'll end up with two coins, which are slightly smaller, okay? And of course, as you can imagine, the peasants hated that because they thought they were losing. Of course, their currency was being debased. And that was one of the reasons he ended up very unpopular amongst all the others. So let's have a look at this reason for coins. Very simple. Let's imagine that I have, I don't know, I have a joint of beef over here. This is me with a joint of beef. And you have over here an apple. I mean, the apple green. Okay. And you look at my joint of beef and you go, I'd much rather have your joint of beef. And I look at your apple and I go, I'd much rather have your apple. The question has to be, which one is the better one to have? Well, I think the apple's better and you think it's the joint of beef. So we're both crazy because if it was the other way, if they were equivalent, in other words, if we were equivalent to swap, we wouldn't swap them. I just stick with my beef and you stick with the apple. So what's funniest of all is that all this trade and interaction depends on a misunderstanding of value. What I value is different from what you value, and that's why we trade. So they used to have to carry around entire cows just in case they came across with somebody with an apple. And then somebody came up with an idea, why don't we use something which would represent it? I'm from Ghana. And what we discovered was we had these shells called cowrie shells. And the cowrie shells were quite unusual. You didn't find very many of them. And so they went, look, a cow is 20 cowrie shells. So just put those in your pocket. And then when you meet somebody, give them the 20 cowrie shells. They'll give you the apple. And then they'll, half the apple, or give them 10 cowrie shells. And then they can go and swap. So basically, that was the invention of currency, which wasn't just barter. And then we went on from there. And somebody said, how about we use silver? And they came up with silver. Great idea. Let's use silver. Let's make it into little round things and stamp the head of the Caesar's head on it. They said, oh, why don't we try gold? And then they went for gold, etc., etc. So that basically was the process through which we ended up with these gold coins, which Henry was ripping us off on. That's the starting point of it, to understand how transaction works and how currency comes about. The challenge, of course, is how do you end up with inflation? Because there's only so much gold. There's only so much silver. There are only so many cowrie shells. Aha, I'll let you in on the secret. You can't go doing the clipping because people are wise to that. I showed you that about the coin, eh? The coin shows whether it's been clipped or not. So what happened was there were other kings, and there was a king in France, okay, and he liked building castles and things like that, and Versailles things and all sorts of marvelous things. He was really good at his building and spending of money. And then he came across this consultant. I think the consultant's name was John Lowe or John Law, something like that. You can look it up, it doesn't matter. But basically, this consultant met with his finance minister and they came up with a plan which they sold to the king, which basically said, you know, king, how you only have so many gold coins for building your palaces? Yes. Okay. Well, if instead of giving away the gold coins, you told people that you've written on a piece of paper that you'll give them I don't know, what would have been, a franc, a livre, whatever it is, later, right on that, then they can come and claim it. Okay, and promise them a note. Okay, great, well done, good idea. So basically what happened was the king would just write these notes and so on and produce loads and loads of notes, more notes than he had gold in his coffers for. But everything was well until they had a really bad harvest. And then everything fell apart because people went to try and get the gold. They couldn't get it. They were fed up, blah, blah, blah. But basically what had happened is he ran so many notes, he inflated the currency, and then there was a crash. And basically I'm giving you like the shorthand version of how the French Revolution came apart. Okay. And it was all pretty grim. And as a result of that, the king got really, really stressed and worried about everything. And you might describe it as he was so upset he lost his head, but he actually literally did lose his head. Danger in inflation. It kills. Okay. So we figured that out. So after that had happened, we learned. We said, okay, well, when we have currencies in the future, we'll say you can only make as many notes as you have gold. It was called the gold standard. And most of the currencies around the world pegged to that. We said to the banks, look, bank, you can only have a ratio of lending, which is the prudential ratio. So you can only write so many bits of paper for this amount of gold. And as you heard from the story of the German hiker, it's not how much money you lend out specifically, it's how fast the money moves around, because it can finance lots of transactions with the same amount of money. So it's always good. And then in the 70s, we broke the link between the gold standard and the currencies. And then also subsequently, as you saw in 2008, we stopped paying any attention to this prudential ratio thing. Net result is that if you were in the right place, you could just keep printing money. You could be writing these notes. Writing a few notes, nobody notices. And that's the norm. Since the 70s, real income hasn't grown for the middle classes at all. Most goods are, and in the blog you'll see, most goods have gone up tremendously, but nobody notices because it's a slow process. You only notice the jog of inflation when it turns into a sprint. And that's probably where we are now. And so what I'm going to stop there, because in the rest of the article, I'll explain what you need to do in order to be able to survive this sprint without panicking. Great, that's a good place to stop. Let's stop there, close that, and thank you very much.